In the 1960s, British agricultural trials documented something that should not be biologically possible: yields that violated every principle of soil science, numbers that contradicted decades of research into nutrient cycling and plant productivity. On marginal land where other crops failed completely, this plant produced 100 tons of green matter per acre, not once under perfect conditions, repeatedly, year after year, season after season. It was cut down 5 times in a single growing year, and every time it was cut, it returned to full height in just 4 weeks, as if nothing had happened, as if the cutting had made it stronger. Scientists measured its decomposition rate next, expecting results similar to other green manures. Alfalfa takes weeks to break down. Clover sits stubbornly intact for a month or more before microbes can unlock its nutrients. Grass clippings resist decomposition for similar periods. This plant dissolved into soil in 48 hours. Leaves collapsed. Cell walls surrendered. Minerals flooded back into the ground almost immediately. No known green manure behaved this way. Victorian England called it famine insurance. By 1954, one obsessed researcher had bred 21 distinct varieties, searching for the perfect strain that would feed the world. And by 2001, it had vanished from nearly every garden center in North America. Not because it failed, not because it was disproven, it vanished. At the exact same moment, the global fertilizer industry crossed $230 billion in annual revenue, an industry powered by natural gas extraction, ammonia synthesis plants consuming vast energy, and a business model built entirely on permanent dependency. Farmers worldwide were told that soil fertility must be purchased every year, in precise ratios, from sealed bags, delivered on schedule, applied according to instructions, repeated indefinitely. Yet this plant produced fertility endlessly, without permission, without contracts, without a supply chain that could be controlled or monetized. Its name is comfrey, Symphytum officinale, later Symphytum times uplandicum, and the story of how it was systematically removed from mainstream agriculture reveals something deeply uncomfortable about how economic systems react when nature offers freedom they cannot profit from. This isn't speculation. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented history, buried in agricultural journals, preserved in the work of 2 men who dedicated their lives to a plant that threatened to make an entire industry obsolete. Welcome to Veiled Earth, where we uncover what was deliberately erased. The plant that healed what it shouldn't. The first written record of comfrey appears in 90 AD, when the Greek physician Dioscorides catalogued a peculiar plant with thick, mucilaginous roots in De Materia Medica. That book remained Europe's primary medical reference for 1,500 years. Dioscorides prescribed comfrey not for soil, but for bones. The Greek name symphyton literally means to grow together, or to unite. He claimed it could knit broken bones, heal torn flesh, mend what should remain separated. The Romans tested this claim. Pliny the Elder, never one to accept medical theory without demonstration, boiled comfrey roots into a paste and used it to bind pieces of meat together. The adhesive held. The reputation stuck. For 2 millennia, Europeans called it knitbone, broken limbs, torn flesh, wounds that wouldn't close. Comfrey was the answer. Herbalists prescribed it. Folk healers swore by it. The plant's reputation for healing became so established that its other properties were almost completely overlooked. Almost, because what comfrey truly healed wasn't human tissue. It was land. But that discovery wouldn't happen until desperation forced someone to look at the plant differently, until famine made someone realize that healing soil might matter more than healing bones. The Quaker who watched a million die. Henry Doubleday was a poor Quaker living in Essex, England. In 1845, when reports from Ireland began arriving, the potato blight had struck. Crops were failing. People were starving. Over the next several years, approximately 1 million Irish people would die. Another million would flee. Doubleday watched helplessly as the catastrophe unfolded across the sea. He wasn't a farmer. He had tried manufacturing starch. That business failed. He tried producing glue for the new postage stamps. That failed too. But the images of mass starvation never left him. In the 1850s, still searching for a viable glue source, he wrote to the head gardener at the Royal Palace in St. Petersburg requesting a specific variety of Russian comfrey known for its mucilaginous properties. Then fate intervened in a way that would change agricultural history. The plants he received were not pure Russian comfrey, Symphytum officinale. They were an accidental cross, an F1 hybrid between Russian comfrey and prickly comfrey, Symphytum asperum. This hybrid exhibited heterosis, genetic vigor that neither parent possessed individually. When Doubleday planted them, the results were staggering. These weren't the modest yields he expected. These plants grew with a ferocity and productivity he'd never witnessed. 100 tons of green matter per acre, 5 cuttings per season, regrowth in 4 weeks. The numbers seemed impossible. Doubleday abandoned the glue business immediately. The Irish famine had shown him what truly mattered: food security, soil fertility, the ability to produce abundance without dependence on systems that could fail catastrophically. He spent the next 30 years of his life meticulously documenting comfrey's potential as food, forage, and soil regeneration. He grew it on different soil types. He measured yields precisely. He recorded nutritional composition. He tested its effects on other crops. He experimented with cultivation techniques, harvest timing, and preservation methods. He died at age 92, still poor, still ignored by mainstream agriculture, still absolutely convinced that this plant could prevent future famines. And then tragedy struck that almost erased comfrey from history entirely. His family, not understanding the significance of his work, burned all his notes. 3 decades of yield data, cultivation techniques, nutritional analyses, and agricultural observations went up in flames. The full extent of what Doubleday had discovered vanished into ash. For decades, comfrey cultivation declined. The Industrial Revolution was transforming agriculture toward mechanization and chemical inputs. Farmers were adopting new methods focused on tractors, synthetic fertilizers, and standardized practices. The eccentric Quaker who had achieved 100 tons per acre with nothing but a spade and patience was forgotten. His hybrid comfrey plants survived in scattered gardens, but the knowledge of what they could do was nearly lost. Until one man decided to finish what Doubleday had started. The man who gave it away for free. In 1948, a young horticulturist named Lawrence Hills stumbled across a reference to Henry Doubleday's work in an obscure agricultural journal. The brief mention described impossible yields and claimed the research had been lost. Hills was intrigued. If even half of what the article suggested was true, Doubleday had discovered something revolutionary, something that could transform soil fertility without the chemical inputs that were becoming standard in post-war agriculture. He began investigating. He tracked down surviving comfrey strains scattered across Britain, remnants growing behind old barns, along hedgerows, in forgotten plots that no one had bothered to clear for decades. He collected them systematically, every variety he could find, every strain that might carry genetics from Doubleday's original hybrid. Then he did something remarkably scientific for an amateur researcher. He planted them all side by side, 21 varieties in identical soil, under identical conditions, with identical care, or more accurately, identical neglect. He recorded everything: growth rates, cutting yields, regrowth speed, mineral content, disease resistance, drought tolerance, winter hardiness. By the early 1960s, after more than a decade of meticulous observation, one strain dominated every single metric. It grew faster than the others. It recovered from cutting more quickly. It delivered higher concentrations of potassium, calcium, and phosphorus. Its leaves were larger, thicker, more productive. And critically, this was the detail that would prove most important: it produced no viable seed. It was completely sterile. This plant could not spread uncontrollably. It could not become invasive. It stayed exactly where it was planted. Hills named it Bocking 14, after the village where his research station was located. He understood immediately what he had: a sterile perennial that produces massive biomass, mines deep minerals from subsoil, decomposes faster than any other green manure, and feeds soil indefinitely without replanting. This plant solved every fertility problem that chemical agriculture claimed required purchased inputs. It ended the need for annual nitrogen applications, for mined phosphorus, for potassium supplements. It made soil fertility permanent and free. And that made it dangerous. Hills could have patented Bocking 14. He could have licensed it to nurseries and collected royalties for decades. He could have built a fortune on a plant that every farmer and gardener would want. Instead, he refused to claim any ownership. He founded the Henry Doubleday Research Association in honor of the Quaker who had first recognized comfrey's potential, and he mailed root cuttings for free to anyone who requested them. Gardeners in England, farmers in Africa, researchers in America, permaculture designers in Australia. Anyone who asked received a package containing living roots and instructions for propagation. By the time Hills retired in the 1980s, Bocking 14 was growing on 6 continents, passed hand to hand like contraband knowledge that couldn't be controlled or monetized. And that's when the scientific analysis began to reveal exactly why the fertilizer industry should be terrified. The numbers that broke the rules. When laboratory analysis of Bocking 14 was completed, the results explained everything. The impossible yields, the rapid soil improvement, the performance that violated conventional agricultural wisdom. Start with potassium. Fresh comfrey leaves contain over 7% potassium by dry weight. To put that in perspective, farmyard manure, long considered the gold standard for organic fertility, rarely exceeds 1.5% potassium content. Comfrey delivers more than 4 times the potassium concentration of manure, pound for pound. Commercial compost typically ranges from 0.5% to 2% potassium. Green manure crops bred specifically for fertility, alfalfa, clover, vetch, max out around 2 to 3%. Comfrey exceeds them all. But potassium is only the beginning. Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, iron, and trace minerals that modern soils had lost through decades of extraction without replacement. Comfrey contained them all in bioavailable forms. Then came the decomposition studies, and this is where comfrey truly broke from every known pattern. Most green manures resist decomposition. Their cell walls are tough. Their fiber content is high. Even when chopped and incorporated into soil, they remain structurally intact for weeks, sometimes months, before microbes can break them down enough to release nutrients. Comfrey's cell walls collapse almost immediately. Its fiber content is unusually low. Its leaves are approximately 85% water, but the solid matter that remains is almost perfectly designed for rapid microbial consumption. Toss fresh comfrey leaves onto a compost pile, and within hours, not days, hours, the pile temperature spikes. Microbial activity explodes. Material that had been sitting dormant suddenly activates. Within 48 hours, comfrey leaves that were identifiable as leaves have transformed into dark, unrecognizable slurry. The cellular structure has dissolved completely. The minerals have been released. The organic matter has begun its transformation into humus. No other green manure approaches this rate. Nothing else feeds soil this quickly. But the true secret, the mechanism that makes all of this possible, lies underground. The roots that mine the earth. Comfrey doesn't just access nutrients in topsoil. It reaches far beyond where most plants can go. Its roots penetrate 8 to 10 feet deep into the earth. Some documented cases show roots reaching 15 feet in favorable soil conditions. That's deeper than wheat, deeper than corn, deeper than most vegetables and annual crops by a factor of 5 or more. Those roots function as biological mining equipment. They push through compacted subsoil that shallow roots cannot penetrate. They access mineral deposits that have been locked away for decades, untouched since the soil was formed. Potassium that washed down below the root zone years ago. Calcium that leached deeper than vegetables can reach. Phosphorus bound in layers that crops never see. Comfrey pulls it all back up. The roots absorb these deep minerals and transport them to the leaves. The plant concentrates them, and when you cut the leaves, you're physically moving deep earth fertility to the surface where your garden plants can access it. This is nutrient cycling on a geological scale. You're not adding fertility from outside. You're recovering fertility that was always present but inaccessible. It's mining without machinery, fertilization without factories, soil building without purchased inputs. Cut comfrey when it reaches 2 feet tall. Lay the leaves around tomatoes, under fruit trees, along rows of heavy feeders. Within days, the mulch collapses, the nutrients release, the soil darkens and comes alive. Earthworm populations explode, fungal networks expand, bacterial diversity increases, soil structure improves, water retention rises. Everything changes. Not over seasons, over weeks. This is why gardeners who discover comfrey become evangelical about it. It's not belief or ideology. It's direct observation of soil transformation happening faster than should be possible. And this is why, by the mid-20th century, comfrey represented an existential threat to an industry that was just consolidating its power. The industry built on dependence. In the early 1900s, scientists issued dire warnings. The world was running out of nitrogen. Natural fertilizer sources. Guano deposits from seabird colonies. Chilean nitrate mines were depleting. Without new nitrogen sources, global famine was inevitable. Then German chemists Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch developed a process to synthesize ammonia from atmospheric nitrogen using high pressure, high temperature, and massive energy input from fossil fuels. The Haber-Bosch process saved billions of people from starvation. It's not an exaggeration to say that roughly half of the world's current population exists because of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. But it came with a cost that's rarely discussed. It chained agriculture to fossil fuels permanently. Every bag of nitrogen fertilizer represents natural gas extracted, processed, and transformed. Every application requires more gas, more energy, more industrial infrastructure. Today, the Haber-Bosch process consumes approximately 1–2% of global energy production and generates roughly 1–2% of total carbon emissions. The fertilizer industry is worth over $230 billion annually. And that entire system depends on one fundamental principle. Farmers must purchase inputs every single year. The business model requires constant consumption. Nitrogen volatilizes and washes away. So next year you buy more. Phosphorus binds to soil particles and becomes unavailable. So you buy more. Potassium leaches below the root zone. So you buy more. The cycle never ends. The purchases never stop. Agriculture becomes a subscription service where the subscription is mandatory. Comfrey destroys that model completely. You plant comfrey once. It produces for 20 years or more. Some established stands have been documented continuously producing for 40+ years without replanting. You need no nitrogen inputs because comfrey's rapid decomposition provides it. You need no phosphorus supplements because comfrey mines it from deep subsoil. You need no potassium applications because comfrey delivers it at 7% concentration. You need no irrigation after establishment because 10-foot roots access deep water tables. You need no pest management because almost nothing bothers it. You need no annual seed purchases because the plant regenerates from root fragments. The entire dependency loop breaks. Fertility becomes permanent instead of purchased. And every farmer or gardener who adopts comfrey represents revenue permanently lost to the fertilizer industry. If Henry Doubleday's vision had spread, if every farmer in Britain had followed his example in the 1870s, the synthetic fertilizer industry might never have gained its foothold. The dependency model might never have become normalized. But Doubleday's notes burned. His work was forgotten. And by the time Lawrence Hills rediscovered comfrey's potential, chemical agriculture had already become entrenched. Still, Bocking 14 was spreading. Free root cuttings were traveling worldwide. Gardeners were discovering that they could stop buying fertilizer entirely. The knowledge was escaping control. And then, in 2001, something happened that surgically removed comfrey from mainstream awareness. The warning that became a weapon. On July 6, 2001, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration issued a warning about comfrey. The agency advised manufacturers to remove comfrey products intended for internal consumption from the market. The science behind the warning was sound. Comfrey roots, not leaves, but roots, contain pyrrolizidine alkaloids, PAs, compounds that can cause liver damage if consumed in large quantities over extended periods. Research had shown that people taking concentrated comfrey supplements, drinking comfrey root tea daily, or consuming comfrey root products were at risk of hepatotoxicity. The FDA's concern was legitimate. The recommendation was appropriate. The warning applied specifically to dietary supplements, teas, capsules, and other products meant for human consumption. It did not apply to growing comfrey in gardens. It did not apply to using comfrey leaves as mulch or compost. It did not apply to any external agricultural or horticultural use. But that's not what the headlines said. Media reports simplified the story. FDA warns. Comfrey toxic. Comfrey linked to liver damage. Dangerous plant removed from market. No distinction was made between eating concentrated supplements and laying leaves on soil. No explanation was given that PA content is primarily in roots, not leaves. No context was provided about safe external uses. Garden centers saw the headlines and panicked. Why stock a plant labeled toxic? Why risk customer concerns? Potential liability? Negative publicity? Nurseries stopped carrying comfrey. Seed catalogs removed it. Within 5 years, comfrey had vanished from mainstream gardening retail in North America. The public heard, liver damage, and assumed the plant was dangerous to even touch or grow. The idea that comfrey could be safely used as fertilizer never entered the conversation. And here's the timing that's worth noting. In 2001, natural gas prices were beginning a long-term rise. The fertilizer industry was consolidating into massive multinational conglomerates, companies whose entire business model depended on permanent agricultural dependency. And suddenly, the one plant that offered an alternative to that dependency was effectively removed from public access. Not through legislation, not through an actual ban, through confusion, liability fear, and market forces that made comfrey commercially unviable to sell. The result was surgical. Comfrey disappeared from where most people buy plants, and without access, most gardeners never learned it existed. But the plant itself? Comfrey didn't vanish. It did what it has always done. It went underground. The network that kept it alive. When garden centers stopped selling comfrey, the people who already understood its value didn't panic. They didn't rip out their established plants. They didn't forget what they'd witnessed in their own soil. They just stopped talking about it publicly. Instead, comfrey moved into quiet networks. Permaculture groups exchanged root cuttings at meetups. Farmers planted it along fence lines where it wouldn't be noticed. Food forest designers incorporated it systematically but didn't advertise the fact. Gardeners shared divisions with neighbors, wrapped in newspaper, handed over backyard fences with simple instructions. Plant it somewhere permanent. Cut it when it's tall. Use the leaves as mulch. Online forums developed coded discussions. That plant that starts with C. The fertility perennial. Lawrence Hill's favorite. Because comfrey has one characteristic that makes it impossible to truly eradicate. It reproduces from root fragments. A piece of root the size of your little finger can regenerate an entire plant. Dig it up carelessly, and you'll create 5 new plants from the pieces you leave behind. This isn't aggressiveness. This is survival strategy evolved over millennia. And it's why comfrey couldn't be removed the way authorities removed access to seeds or retail plants. Every gardener who had comfrey became a potential source for dozens more. The plant propagated through human networks faster than any regulatory action could stop. By the 2010s, permaculture designers were quietly making Bocking 14 central to their systems. One plant could supply fertility for 20 other plants. Cut comfrey 5 times per season, and you had enough mulch and compost activator for an entire garden. The knowledge that Lawrence Hills had worked so hard to spread wasn't lost. It had simply moved underground, literally and figuratively, waiting for the moment when people were ready to listen again. And that moment is arriving now. Why comfrey matters more than ever. We're entering a period of agricultural instability that makes comfrey's properties more relevant than they've been since the Irish famine. Fertilizer prices have spiked dramatically, driven by natural gas costs and global supply chain disruptions. Farmers worldwide are facing input costs that make profitable production nearly impossible. Climate change is intensifying droughts. Regions that once had reliable rainfall are experiencing multi-year dry periods. Irrigation is becoming scarce and expensive. Shallow-rooted crops are failing. Soil degradation continues. Decades of chemical-dependent agriculture have depleted organic matter, destroyed soil structure, and eliminated the biological networks that make soil alive rather than just dirt. And simultaneously, people are recognizing that dependence on systems they don't control is vulnerability, not security. Comfrey offers specific solutions to specific problems.
Water scarcity. 10-foot roots access water tables that surface irrigation can't reach. Established comfrey survives droughts that kill annual crops. Fertilizer costs, 7% potassium content and 48-hour decomposition eliminate the need for purchased inputs. The plant is the fertilizer. Soil degradation. Rapid organic matter addition rebuilds soil structure faster than any other method. Comfrey heals dead ground. Dependency. Once planted, the system runs for decades without external inputs. No annual purchases, no supply chains, no vulnerability to price shocks. This isn't nostalgia for old methods. This is recognition that some solutions don't need to be high-tech to be effective, they just need to work. And comfrey works. How to actually use it. If you decide comfrey belongs in your system, there are 3 primary methods, each with specific applications. Method 1, chop and drop mulch. Cut comfrey when it reaches 18 to 24 inches tall, before flowering. This is when nutrient concentration is highest. Lay the cut leaves around heavy feeders, tomatoes, squash, fruit trees, berries. The leaves will collapse rapidly. Don't worry about the slimy appearance. That's the cellular structure breaking down and releasing nutrients. Within a week, what looked like whole leaves becomes dark, unrecognizable mulch. The plants above will respond noticeably: deeper green foliage, stronger stems, better fruit set. Not because you're forcing growth with nitrogen, but because you're providing complete mineral nutrition. Method 2. Compost accelerator. If your compost pile stalls, if it goes cold and nothing happens for weeks, comfrey restarts it. Add a layer of chopped comfrey leaves to a dormant pile. Within hours, temperature rises. Within a day, the pile is actively composting again. Comfrey acts as a biological catalyst. Its rapid decomposition and high mineral content feed microbial populations explosively. Stalled processes restart. Cold piles activate. Material that sat unchanged for months transforms in days. Method 3. Liquid feed. Fill a bucket with chopped comfrey leaves. Add water. Cover. Let it sit for 2 to 4 weeks. The result will smell terrible. There's no way around that, but the liquid will be dark brown and concentrated. Dilute this liquid 10:1 or even 20:1 with water before applying to plants. It's essentially liquid minerals extracted from deep subsoil, used as a foliar feed or soil drench. It delivers nutrition directly and immediately. This method requires the most effort, but it produces the most concentrated results. Plants respond within days. Why systems cannot control it? Comfrey represents something that centralized agricultural systems cannot tolerate: permanent, decentralized abundance that operates outside their control. You cannot patent a plant that reproduces from root fragments. You cannot force annual purchases when the plant lives for 20 years. You cannot create dependency when the solution perpetuates itself freely. Every major agricultural input follows a pattern. A free solution is replaced by a controlled one.